So good evening, everyone. We will start with a short breathing exercise followed by motivations. Then we can think our life will be much more meaningful and enriched if we can practice the Dharma. And practice the Dharma means transforming and changing our mind. And transforming and changing our mind means reducing and overcoming all the afflictive emotions which are harmful to ourselves and others. As well as selfish attitude, the self-centeredness. By cultivating and increasing all the positive state of mind, such as loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta mind. Wisdom relies on the ultimate truth and all the realizations. And to do that, we need to reflect, contemplate, meditate, practice. And for that, we need to listen to the teachings, read, reflect, contemplate on the teachings or meaning of the teachings. That is why we are here. So, may coming here with the good intentions and listening to the Dharma, the teachings, help us to transform our heart, our mind, and gradually to be able to actualize our own highest potential, the Buddhahood. So we can be greatest source of happiness and benefit to each and every sentient beings. Okay.
Page 73, the first verse once. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakti clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. Page 76, the Heart of Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. I prostrate to the Art of Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time, the Bhagavan was dwelling in the mass of Bodhi's mountain, in Rajgriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya-Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also empty of inherentness. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya-Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya-Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates, also empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors in consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without character, unproduced, unceased, stainless, without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling of discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, so on up to and including no mind element, and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, sensation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awakened and surprised perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of the great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as the mantra. The mantra of perfection of wisdom is declared. Tayata, Om, Gate, Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhi Soha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from the concentration and commanded the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya-Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as we have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice
The Bhagavan having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasat, Aryavalokiteshvara, and those surrounding the entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, we all joy and highly praise that spoken by the Bhagavan.
Page 97 at the bottom, or at the top of 98, the short mandala offering. Sashibhaki Chonshimedo Tanriraldinchi Nindegen Bande Sangye Shindu Mide Uwai Dokun Nanta Shinla Chöpaisha Idam Guru Ratnamandala Tayami. Refuge in bodhicitta, once in English, twice in Tibetan. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye Shodan Soki Chonan La Chanju Bardu Gangi Suchi Dagi Chonan Ge Peso Namgi Drula Pencher Sangye Druparsho Sangye Shodan Soki Chonan La Chanju Bardu Gangi Suchi Dagi Chonan Ge Peso Namgi Drula Pencher Sangye Druparsho. Kanje Dujani Rone, Tao Tunja Bombeja, Tambechuni Penjeve, Kodam de la Chao. In order to achieve our own highest or greatest potential, the fully awakened state, there are common and uncommon causes, and such as the understanding of samsara or nature of samsara, realizations of impermanent karma, refuge, emptiness. All of them are a common cause, that is needed for fully enlightenment as well for the individual liberation, nirvana. But one of the uncommon cause for the fully enlightenment is the bodhicitta, the method. And in order to cultivate the bodhicitta mind, then we need to meditate, practice, and then by following particular meditations or method of meditations, and the 7 point of cause and effect, or 7 instruction of cause and effect, and then either following that method or by following equalizing exchanging set with others. And now we are on that cultivating bodhicitta mind by following the exchanging equalizing set with others, that particular method. And in that method, we start with the foundation of equanimity. And once you have that foundation of equanimity, then we try to meditate on by understanding how we and all sentient beings are equal in wanting to be happy and not wanting to suffer. So really feeling, understanding and feeling that we all are equal. And also then understanding, and through practice, meditations, understanding how our own selfish attitude is the very root of our problem, and is the root of all the world problems on individual level, on on family level, on worldly level, the main cause of our all conflict and problem is our own selfish attitude. Through that understanding of how that is the very root of all this problem, and then um, trying to use all the practice and meditation method to reduce and overcome that as much as possible. And then also through meditation and understanding and meditation, realizing how cherishing thought for others is the very root of our own temporary ultimate happiness. Temporary happiness, ultimate happiness is the source of our own happiness, happiness of our family, happiness of the society we live in, the world we live in, and happiness all sentient beings. Through that understanding, then again using every practice, meditation method to cultivate and improve and increase that cherishing thought for others more stronger and stronger. And through having understood the disadvantage or the faults of selfish attitude and the benefit of cherishing thought for others, having understood that, then trying to exchange our attitude. And so by transforming and changing the attitude, exchanging the attitude means, the way we cherish ourselves now, the way we cherish ourselves more than others, we try to change that dance, and then we try to cherish others even more than ourselves. And at the moment, we hardly cherish others, or even we cherish them a little bit, but definitely we cherish ourselves much more than anyone else. And and so changing that, I think, exchanging the attitude by cultivating similar attitude, the way we cherish to ourselves towards others and cherishing others more. And so I think we are on that point. Once you have exchanged, that's able to exchange that attitude, then on the basis of that changing of attitude, as you cherish others, then you have more willingness and more willingness, more strength to take on others' sufferings on yourself when you cherish them. Just like when you cherish your children so much, you are willing to go through their pain so they don't have the experience. The more you cherish, the more you have feeling of kindness, the more you feel that without any hesitation, if I could suffer instead of them, that kind of thought will come, that kind of strength and the confidence and courage will come easily. And when you have that strong, then you will feel, I wish I could share and give my happiness, my goodness, whatever good things are happening in your life, happiness, joyfulness, good things, success, whatever you feel, I wish I could give that to the child that you cherish very much. And so on the basis of that, then you do the practice of Tonglen, taking the suffering of others, giving your own happiness. Excellent. And so that Tonglen practice become more natural because of that kind of confidence, courage, strength, and so not only really kind of visualizing, you are actually really wanting to take on this suffering without any hesitations, really thinking, I wish I could take on them, and then taking, wishing really I could give my happiness to them, and trying. And so then through the practice of Tonglen, taking and giving, then our loving kindness, compassion is increasing, improve, and develop further. And through the through the development of loving kindness, compassion that come with effort at the very beginning, then eventually effortlessly, And then that loving kindness, compassion, leading to the bodhicitta mind. And so I think that is, and at the moment we are at, I think, with a fourth point, I guess, exchange themselves with others, and yeah, 135, and okay, yeah. When training this mind, there are two obstacles. That's where we are. So at the moment, when we think of ourselves and when we think of others, you know, you almost feel that we are separate entity and not connected, you know, almost individual separate entity. When we think of myself and others, it's totally different entity. And that is why then we have so-called self and others, that is feeling separate and true, oneself and others, the basis of one's own and others' happiness and suffering into distinct entity. That's how we feel at the moment, like blue and yellow, just as very separate. Something, two things, colors, you know, two color things, blue and yellow, totally different, unrelated, totally different entity. That is how we feel when we think of oneself and others. And you hold them to be established in this way. And because we hold that totally two different identity like that, you know, then when it comes to our own suffering, we try to avoid it. We try to overcome it. But when it comes to others' suffering, we don't feel that way. You know, we don't feel same way, the way we feel like we want to avoid our sufferings, the way we want to overcome our suffering. We don't feel that way because we feel totally two different separate entity. And when it comes to happiness for our own, we want to try everything to cultivate that happiness. But we might not feel that same for others. And we don't feel that same, again, because we don't feel same to them the way we feel to ourselves, because we feel those two almost like two separate entities. And that is the problem, you know. And now, you know, when we talk about it, sometimes we think, oh, they are not totally separated, but our natural kind of spontaneous feeling, innate feeling, that is how we feel on everyday level, you know, and that. Then with respect to the happiness suffering, based on them, you think since it is mine, you know, it should be accomplished, you know. If it is happiness, it should be accomplished. And if it is a suffering, or removed. So if it's suffering, then you feel it should be removed. Since it is someone else, you know, then if you see suffering of someone else, then you don't feel it needs to be removed. And if you feel it is something to do with happiness or others, you don't feel that you have to accomplish that. And so therefore, in that way, it is to be neglected. So in that way, we neglect it. Others' well-beings. Therefore, as an antidote to this, so then that's how we have to think to antidote. Myself and others are not distinct entity by nature. You know, they are not totally separate entity, not totally unrelated, unconnected entity, or is not absolute separate or absolute entity, separate entity by nature. Rather, if we look at one another, the mind, others arise in me, whereas the I arise into other person. So all is relative. You know, from my side, I have feeling, oh, others when I look at you. From your side, when you look at me, you say is I. So others and self is relative from which perspective you look at it. If you look from your perspective, it's self. If I look from my perspective, it's others. So therefore, there's no such absolutes called self of others. But even though there's no such absolute, but our mind kind of almost grasps that way. And then that is the problem. And so that is where he is. So we have to think that way to overcome such um, sense of so disconnected, so separate entity, so absolute separate entity in that way. Mm. Thus, it is like mountain over here and mountain over there. For instance, also from this perspective, from this your side, perspective of mind, mountain over there. So Santa Fe Baldi is over there. Okay. Arises with respect to the mountain over there. When you go to the mountain over there, so you go to the Baldi, the mind mountain over here arises. Then you think, oh, Santa Fe Baldi is here. So whether it's here or there is all perspective. There's no absolute. Just as there is no absolute here and there, or absolute mountain there or mountain here, same way there is no absolute self and others. It's all from which perspective, which side that you look at. Therefore, it is not the same as the fact that in whoever look at the color blue, a mind just blue will arise, whereas a mind of another color will not arise. So whereas like is a blue, and of course it can also change, if some people have color, what you call color blank, maybe they might see differently. But in generally, people who doesn't have any kind of disease and kind of color blank, then, whether you look from that side, whether you look from this side, you see blue. Maybe sometimes lightning might make slightly difference, depending on lightning, but otherwise you wouldn't see it as a yellow, and so so therefore, even of course blue and yellow is also not absolute. There's no doubt about it. But when it comes to self and other, even it is not even as separate entity as the blue and blue color and yellow color is. And so therefore that is basically, because of our familiarity, that's why we feel this as self and we cherish so much. And because of certain familiarity imprint, and we see others as others, and then we don't cherish them as much. And so therefore that is, and so in this manner, Shantideva's continuum of training also teaches that self and others are not established by their own entity or inherently or independently existence, they all are relative, but merely position depending on the point of view as just explained. Even though sometimes we feel, regardless of others, there is always self. That is sense of grasping of independent self. We feel regardless whether there is any others there or not, self is always there, as long as you are there. But we cannot think is a self if there is no others. Self, we can talk in self only in relation to others. We can talk about others only in relation to self. We can talk about there only in relation to here. We can only talk about here only in relation to there. Therefore, without one of them, there is none of them. And that is one of the Prasangika's unique point of view of dependent arising, mutual dependent arising. We're not talking about dependent arising cause and conditions. We're not even talking about depending on its parts, which is more kind of common to all the Buddhist, most of the Buddhist schools. But here, not only that, here only exists only in relation to others. If there's no others, there is no here. If there's no here, there's no others. If there's no small, there is no big. If there's no big, there is no small. So they all exist by depending on each other in mutual dependent arising. And that is one of the unique of Prasangika, even though maybe I'm going a little bit kind of over the top, not on the point, but whether it's a mind-only school and others, to something to establish as existence, for let's say, the cup to establish as existence, there need to be a valid perception or consciousness that perceive that cup. Through that valid cognitions, perceiving the cup, then the existence of cup is established. So then how do you establish that perception, valid cognition of perception that established cup to exist, that one? Then you need another valid cognition to establish that mind. Do you get it? And so if there's another mind that is realizing that to prove this exists, then again to prove this, you have another mind and it becomes endless. It becomes endless. And therefore, the mind-only school come with this idea of rangrik, self-realizing. While the mind is, the perception is cognizing the cup, at the same time there is mind, which is the mind itself is realizing the mind itself. But Prasangika kind of refute that and say you don't need another mind, neither the self-realizing self mind. You can establish this mind to exist by the existing cup. And by existing, so it's mutual, because there is subject, there is object. And because there's object, there is subject. We can only talk about something object. As an object, only there is subject. And we can only talk about something as being subject, only there is object of that subject. And so therefore, that is the Prasangika point of view, neither you need another mind to cognize that mind, neither the mind has to realize itself, the rangrik. Just by the object itself, you can establish the subject, the mind. By the mind, subject, mind, you can establish the object. And so I think it's kind of unique of Prasangika. And so anyway, so it came in here because we're talking about dependent arising point of view. And I think if we have that understanding, it is more deeper than understanding dependent by cause and condition, or even by depending on parts, that way of understanding of dependent arising, I think is more profound and goes more deeper. And so through the familiarity, equality of other and self, bodhisattva grows, so through the practice and familiarity and seeing by feeling, by understanding, and we all are equal, wanting to be happy and not to suffer. And by exchanging the attitude, then the bodhisattva, by exchanging the attitude of self and others, in terms of cherishing others, even more than oneself, then the bodhicitta mind grows very firmly. So it is, once you develop bodhicitta mind on that, then it becomes very strong because it's based on very strong foundations. It's not just like some kind of emotional feeling, you know. Sometimes we have emotional feelings. Sometimes we have emotional feeling or compassions, but it doesn't last. It's not firm. Sometimes it's just a moment. You see someone suffering directly or in the news or something compassion comes, then again it's gone. It's not because it doesn't come on the basis of firm, good foundations, but something that is developed on such a strong foundation. Then once you develop it, then it becomes very firm, stable. Aside from other relational, you know, so there is not an absolute. As I mentioned, the self and others is all relative. Nothing absolute. Just as false as that side or this side. And again, it's all relative, nothing absolute. The self is not that side by itself, you know, but depending on perspective of this side, as we said, we can only talk about that side only in relation to this side and depend on this side. And same way, the self itself is not established by itself, but it is established by depending on perspective of others. So, so depending on others, then we can talk about self. And so understanding that's relativity, you know, relative point of view and non-absolute is important to have better understanding of not to have this strong feeling of self and others as totally two different absolute entity or separate entity. Once we have that, then it makes more solid and it becomes more difficult. And removing the obstacle of thinking, since suffering by others does not harm me, I need not make an effort to remove it. So that's how we feel. Why should I care about others' suffering? Why should I remove their suffering? Because I am not experiencing it. It's their problem. It's not my problem. It's their pain. It's not my pain. So that is how we feel. That is why we don't care so much about well-being of others, you know, because we feel we are not their suffering. We are not experiencing and we are not harmed and pain by their suffering, you know. So that is why. And so here, as Shantideva in his Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life, a lot of those here, Lama Tsongkhapa has taken those analyses from Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life. As it said there, if it were the case, you know, because it doesn't harm you or pain you directly now, therefore you should not be concerned about that. You should not try to remove about it. Then if that is the case, then there will be no need to accumulate wealth when young out of concern for suffering or old age, since suffering or elder person would not harm the youth. So, you know, the old age of ourselves and now we are is not the same persons because it changes, you know. So therefore, with the concern when I get old, I need out of security because I need security because if I don't have enough wealth, who will take care of me? What will happen to me? And because of that kind of concern, we try to accumulate wealth. And so here saying, why should we accumulate that wealth? Because that the suffering that you might suffering that old person might experience is not, you are not experiencing now immediately, you know. And so therefore, so then why should you do that? But if you say, you know, maybe it will come here later. So, but we say, because it is same continuity, therefore, even though you are changing and it is not the same person, but it is still same continuity, therefore you will experience, and therefore you don't want to experience the futures, so even though you are not experienced that directly now, but you try to take care of it so that you don't experience in the futures indirectly. And so if that's the case, then here Shantideva as explained, even though we might not experience others' suffering and pain directly, but indirectly we will experience. Therefore, you should take care of it. It's same like in family, Even though one of your family members is suffering, whether it's physical health, whether it's emotional health, whether it's different kind of struggles, even though their pain is not your direct pain, but you still experience that pain. Indirectly. And when they have success and joyful, even though it's theirs, but you experience that indirectly, you are happy. And not only a family, as the society itself. If there is a prosperity in the society, you experience the result of that. But if the society experience poverty and difficulty, you will get the also effect of that. And therefore, even though it does not affect you directly, but indirectly it affects you. And therefore, you should take care of that too. Just like even though you don't experience the direct suffering of old age now, but in long term you will experience it, so that you take care of it now. And so it's similarly like that, And it said likewise, the mind would not eliminate the suffering of food because there are others. So then, as Shantideva say, when your food is pained by needles or thorn, why will the hand try to relieve the suffering? Because the pain is in the feet, not in the hand, But the hand will go to take the needles or thorn, whatever, to relieve of that, even though they are, because whole body is kind of related each others, It's not isolated. When there is damage to your hand or feet, it will also affect many parts of your body because they are very related. They are not same way. We all sentient beings are related. It is not isolated, separate. Our experience affect each other's. Pleasant experience, unpleasant experience, happiness, suffering, we affect each other's because a part of connectedness. Just like all body is interrelated, connected, also all sentient beings, all humanity, all of them are interrelated, interconnected, and so we affect in some way or another way. And so therefore, taking care of others means taking care of yourself. Taking care of yourself also means taking care of others in a way, just like when you take care of your feet, in a way you are taking care of your eyes, your hand. Taking care of your hand also means taking care of other part of the body which is related with that. If there is a damage to the hand, then that could have damage to many parts of the organ, many other parts. Yes, please. Not absolute, right? Yes. On conventional level, we are talking about conventional level, how we all, because we are related, therefore is not absolute. Yeah. If it is absolute, then we wouldn't have all this effect to each relation in that way. And where was that? Yeah, this is a mere illustration. So these are some of the examples that Lama Tsongkhapa is giving here, and should also apply to the suffering of morning and those of evening and so forth. So because we don't want to suffer in the evening, even though we are not suffering in the morning, we take all precautions. For example, I have to take care of my head when I go in the sun. If I don't take care of it, I will not get a headache immediately. But evening, I will get headache. Sometimes when it's bad, I can have nausea. I can have problem with my stomach and a lot of pain. So because I know if I don't take care of now in the morning when I'm in the sun, if I don't put something, I will get a pain in the evening. So even though I am not experiencing the pain in the morning, because I'm going to suffer in the evening, I will take care of it. Same way, even though others' suffering does not affect us immediately now, but indirectly it will affect us. And so therefore taking care of that is taking care of our own future pain and suffering. And I think that is what the whole world is about. We see very clearly, when in certain society, when certain section of society totally ignore, neglect and totally ignore, and even one part of the society prosperity, but eventually the problem from that society which has been totally neglected will be felt by the prosperity society. We see neighborhoods, for example, there are some neighborhood where prosperity, and if there is a lot of neglected societies or very poor and all of that, then there's more criminal and all of that things. And because of that will affect the more prosperity, the rich people from that, all of that. And so therefore it affects, and we see in so many different economically, in terms of peace, your country, your neighbor country is in mess, you will feel the effect of that. At the moment, this country is feeling the effect of immigration because there is problem in the neighborhoods, the neighbor countries. If they didn't have that problem, they will not immigrate here. And you wouldn't have the same problem, it is here. So taking care of that is taking care of yourself indirectly. If you don't take care of that, because you are not experiencing directly now, doesn't mean it will not affect you. 50 years ago, maybe we thought, oh, it's their problems. We don't need to take care of them. They will fix themselves. If they suffer, they suffer. But now after that, now effect is being felt in these countries. And similar like here, all over the world, in different parts of the world. And so that is where, and here Lama Tsongkhapa, Shandeva make those points, and is so true and relevant, A lot of time is hard to really, when we really reflect in that way, then we can see it. But normally in our everyday, it's hard to feel that way. We feel, oh, this is their problem, their pain. It's not my problems. Feel like that is not going to affect me, it's going to come to me, And so I think those are really, really important point to reflect, contemplate, through reflecting, contemplating, really feeling others' problem as your own problem. And then again, then our mind can come with all these kind of things. And then if you think too, the self and others are not the same, since it's not same like the morning and evening and when you are youth and elders and like that, or the hand and the feet. Since little person and youth are same continuity, and whereas the others and you is not same continuity. So we might think that it's a different, you know. Or while the hand and foot are same collections of one part of body, whereas self and others are not like that, therefore it is not same. That kind of thought could come, and therefore why should I take care of others' well-being and remove their suffering, accomplish their happiness, you know. That kind of thought can come, and if such thought come, then again here how to counter that kind of wrong thoughts, you know, unhealthy thoughts. A continuum, a collection are imputed to many instants and a combination of many parts, you know. Continuity is many instant of the moment of the consciousness or the bodies, and collections, a combination of many parts, and they all lack autonomous entity, and they're all like independent separate entities. And again, just like, since your own self and others must be posited on continuum or collections, they are not established by the way of their own entity, which would not merely be self and other posited in relation. And so just as either that continuity or collections is merely imputed in the same and not absolute existence and all relative. In same way, you know, in the same way, self and others is also same. It is only the self is imputed, merely imputed on collection of your aggregates. Others is merely imputed on collection of others' aggregates. And therefore, also they are non-independently existing, inherently or absolutely existent, and so therefore same in terms of being relatively and on same level and on ultimate level they are same. And so therefore that kind of thinking cannot withstand that kind of reasoning logics. And your own suffering is unbearable. And so if that is the case, then why is that? We don't feel unbearable for the other suffering and we feel unbearable our suffering. You know, if everything is relative and it's only from different perspective, from whether you look from this perspective or other side of the perspective, that's how you feel self or other. If that is the cases, so then why do we feel so unbearable when we're suffering with us and not same with the others? So there, and so here he's saying it's because of familiarity, imprint, habits. Add your own suffering unbearable due to the power of familiarization or self-cherishing from the beginner's lifetime. Therefore, if you familiarize yourself with cherishing others, their suffering will also become unbearable. And so if we train our mind to cherish others, just as you cherish yourself, slowly, with that kind of training, familiarizations and meditations, then you begin to feel others' pain and suffering as you feel with your pain like at the moment, as your own pain. And when you are able to feel others' pain as your own pain, then you will be able to, you will engage into remove it. Then you try to overcome it instead of being neglecting it, instead of being indifferent to it. The reason why we are indifferent at the moment and the reason why we are neglecting is because we don't feel unbearable or we don't feel as our own suffering like at the moment. But with the practice, then you will become where you feel other suffering as your own suffering. And once you feel that other suffering as your own suffering, then you will not be indifferent and neglect it. you know. Mm. The actual way to second, by the power of attachment to the self, you know, this self-cherishing has produced much that is undesirable from much undesirable. What is that? Is suffering, you know. The suffering is the much undesirable, but that self-cherishing or selfish attitude has produced so much undesirable from the beginning time up to now. Despite the fact that you have wanted to create excellent, even though we want to have happiness for ourselves, you know, even though we want best for ourselves all the time from the beginning lifetime, we want best for ourselves, we want happiness for ourselves all the time, but you have relied on unsuitable means. And the unsuitable means that you have relied on is that selfish attitude. What you want is happiness and all the good things, but you rely on something unsuitable that does not lead to that, but it leads to the opposite, more suffering, more unhappiness. And so, and considering your own welfare paramount, you know, because of our selfish attitude, then our own welfare become the priority, is the most important. And by holding that, then, and by following that, the result is only suffering. Because we follow not the right method or the path. Due to this, neither your own welfare nor the others have been accomplished, although countless eons have passed. So even though we have been following this selfish attitude from the beginning lifetime for eons, still we have not able to fulfill our own welfare. Still we struggles, nor we have been able to fulfill the welfare of others. Not only have you failed to accomplish that, you have, even though we might have been unsuccessful in fulfilling our own welfare and welfare of others, if we don't suffer, then that is another level. But not only we are unable to fulfill our own welfare and others, on top of that, due to that selfish attitude, you have only been tormented by the suffering. Endless in this endless samsara, we have been suffering. Good fortune is, I think, you know, sometimes we think not, we complain about not having good memories and all the memories. I think we should be grateful that if you remember all the suffering we have gone through from the endless countless, you will be overwhelmed by that. So it's just we don't remember, but we have experienced all kinds of suffering, you know, and all this because of that selfish attitude. And if you have shifted the concern for your own welfare for that of others, like the Bodhisattvas, by now you would have become a Buddha long time ago. Both your own and others' welfare have, without doubt, become excellent. And I think we all went with the quotation Shantidevas, you know, in the past. So the Buddha has been, at one time they were same like us, but the Buddha has already achieved not only his personal well-being, excellent, highest happiness, ultimate happiness, but he has been able to fulfill and accomplish the well-being of all sentient beings. And the reason why he is able to do is by giving up the selfish attitude and by following the cherishing thought for others. And that is by following that particular method that he was able to do. But since you did not do that, the time has been spent with meaningless exertions. And so as long as, whatever we try to do, worldly, spiritually, if it's driven by a selfish attitude, no matter how much effort you put to achieve lasting happiness, you will not be able to achieve lasting happiness for yourself and for others. No matter how much effort you put, whether in worldly activities or on a spiritual level, as long as it is driven by strong selfish attitude, then you can really achieve real happiness. That is what it is. And so it will be meaningless effort or exertions to achieve real happiness if it is driven by that, to achieve that. So that is why. And it's again, think that now I have understood this through reflection, contemplations, I will rely on mindfulness and vigilance as the tools. That the self-cherishing is my worst enemy, So recognizing, understanding my own selfish attitude is the worst enemy. The selfish attitude and self-grasping, ignorance. These two are the worst enemy, recognizing that. All other enemy of delusion arises from them. Then external enemy arises from those delusions. If you don't have those internal enemy of delusion, you will not have external enemy. And so therefore that is the worst enemy. And then make effort so that selfish attitude or self-cherishing that has not arisen, does not arise, not allowing any opportunity self-cherishing to arise. And that which has arisen due to previous imprint, familiarity, habit, if something arises, then make sure that which has arisen does not last long. So then again, reflecting on disadvantage of that and then applying the antidote and then trying to let it go as soon as possible. Having made this certainty firm, you should familiarize yourself with it in many times. So you should try to do that meditation and practice again and again. So, with our mindfulness, introspection mind, utilizing the introspection of vigilance and mindfulness in our everyday life, thinking what kind of attitude, what kind of thought is going in my mind. Then the moment you see, oh, I have this selfish attitude, then you try to apply whatever technique, meditation you have, trying to reduce, trying to let it go. And when you, with mindfulness introspection, when you realize, oh, the selfish attitude is almost arising. If it's not fully arise at the moment, but you recognize some of the kind of the symptoms, Sometimes you can recognize with your body reactions. Sometimes you can recognize with your mental reactions, with all the delusion, anger, all of that. And so through that, you recognize, oh, the symptoms are arising. If I don't take care of this symptom, selfish attitude will arise. And so before it arises, then you deal with that symptom that it doesn't arise. So you do not give the opportunity that selfish attitude to arise. And if it already arises, you recognize it and then trying to reduce as much as possible, trying to let it go as soon as possible. And so that you have to do all the time, not just one time. Here, as is many times, making every day that as thinking about the advantage of cherishing others again and again in this way, you will generate strong enthusiasm to do so from the bottom of heart. Then you have, from bottom of heart, you have enthusiasm to cultivate that cherishing thought for others. The more you see the benefit, the more you see the advantage, the more you are inspired, the more enthusiasm you have to actualize that kind of attitude. And then you will not generate mind neglecting others. That is not at arising, So, and that which has arisen will not last long. By the means of thought that others are dear, pleasant and attractive, as far as it has arisen, you should generate mind cherishing others just as you previously cherished yourself. So we try to see every sentient beings as a very dear, close, by seeing same, equal, and then through that, then we try to cherish them as much as previously you have cherished yourself. And once you are able to cherish them, as Lama Sopa Rinpoche always says, the moment you cherish others, real happiness, the sun of the real happiness arises or starts, And as His Holiness also always says, true happiness, real happiness starts the moment we are able to let go of cherishing thought for selfish attitude, the moment we cherish others. The elder says, so here elder referring to Lama Adishas. The Tibetan knows bodhisattvas who do not know how to train in love and compassion, So it is almost a sarcastic comment. Well, then, how do you do it? You should do it having trained sequentially from the beginning. So, because, at that time there were some Tibetan masters who were thinking when we have this, sometime when at the beginning of our practice or whatever, we try to develop the bodhicitta motivations, And a lot of Tibetan thought that was the real bodhicitta, And so that is where the Lama Tsongkhapa is making these comments. If you don't have true love and compassion, how can you have bodhicitta? Even though we try to develop bodhicitta motivation with some effort, but it's not real bodhicitta realizations. And that is where Lama Tsong, because some people at that time in Tibet, misunderstood that as being a bodhicitta realization, just because you have bodhicitta motivation that you develop at the very beginning of time. And so he says, if you don't have true loving kindness, compassion, then you cannot have bodhicitta. So in order to have bodhicitta, you need to have great compassion and love. And then how can we do that? And then as he says, starting from whether you are following, whether it's a 7 point of instruction, cause and effect, starting from that subsequently, or whether we are using equalizing and exchanging self with others, again it starts subsequently, and that is how you develop. And so that is the way to do here, Lama Adisha is saying. So that is how we should practice. So again, one thing I wanted to remind, we kind of talk a lot in the classes, Sunday here, all the times. And still a lot of people ask how to meditate. As though what we are discussing is not a meditation method. As here, it already explains how to meditate step by step, how to meditate equalizing self with others, how to meditate on disadvantages, selfish attitude, how to meditate on the benefit of cherishing for the, how to exchange, equalize and exchange, and then how to do the Tonglen, even though it is not really Tonglen, doesn't come very directly here at the moment. So, or the other seven points. So it's, and so those are meditation itself, okay? So it is whether you do at home and really contemplate and take the time to reflect on that or not, that is another thing, but those are meditation technique itself. So don't think there is another meditation technique apart from what we are learning. Sometimes that is what I get impressions. After we go into all through then how to meditate. And we just going through all of that. So being aware all the time what we are learning are meditation technique, not some intellectual information and knowledge. Okay, and so if you pay enough attention, all the meditation technique are the one we are studying and going through. And Geshe Lam-Rim, who composed the 8 verse mind training, he said, another Kadamba Geshe Shawaba, and I have 18 humans methods and 1 horse method, 19 altogether. So here, generally speaking, the human method are to be generally speaking, the human method means how to protect. In generally, I think it is some kind of like slogan or phrases they use, just like every culture in everything, different places, cultures, or places, they have different phrases, slogans, something like that. So the method of human being is how to protect your own dear near ones. And the method of the horse is how to subdue and tame your enemy. So that is what he's telling. But here, this particularly, when he is saying the horse method, that means taming and subduing the enemy, is not referring to external enemy, but internal enemy of selfish attitude. And when he's talking the human method, that is protecting your friends, dear ones. Here is not talking about the external dear friend, but of course that can be, but mainly is the cherishing thought for others, protecting that mind, protecting that attitude of cherishing thought of others. So that is what it really means. Human method are to be generated mindset on supreme enlightenment and training doing whatever it does for the welfare of other sentient beings. And the method of course is self-cherishing. That does not allow bodhisattva, is overcoming that self-cherishing. That does not allow bodhisattva, that has not arisen to arise, and that which arises to remain in increase. Therefore, having taught it in passing, we train in whatever harms it. And as for the sentient being, we train in whatever benefit them. And having taught this as the fundamental point. So basically, whatever hurts and harms sentient beings, and self, we try to refrain from that. Whatever help and benefit other sentient beings, we try to engage in that. And so, and Geshe Kamlungpa also said, since we act devotiously towards noble beings, they will also do the same to us. And so again, it is sometimes we feel, we feel someone is being mean to us, unkind to us for me having not done anything mean and harm to them. But if we took from, sometimes we are doing mean and harm even in this life already, but even in not this life, at least because of our karma that we have been mean and unkind to them, as a consequence is coming back to us. So if we have not been mean and unkind to others in the past or this time, we will not experience the meanness and harm from others. And again, it's very clear, even with any kind of human beings or animals in generally, if you are kind to them, they respond in a more kind way. If you act violently to them, they will also act violently. That it's a general ordinary people's and animals response, and you can see even with the cats and dogs, in the monastery, there was someone has a dog, and I think sometime maybe he might be a little bit mean because They don't know how to, there's no training, you know. They don't have professional trainers, so they don't know how to train. And then some of them stray dogs, you know, and sometimes they can be mean, especially when they are in group, you know. One started barking and then others started to follow them, and then when they all are together, you know, sometimes. And so it happens. There was one dog, and then I think he was almost bite one of the monk, and I think maybe he might have, to protect himself, hit with his leg, you know. Next time, whenever this monk comes, the dog can recognize the sound. Immediately that will come running. Immediately come running, and it's not many times, he just one time, because he was so close and he thought he was going to grab him, so I think he hit him with his leg. And so even the dog know that, and every time he hear the sound, that voice, the dog started coming towards that. And these are so good example of that in Tongmen, who composed the 37 verses of mind training and bodhisattvas. You know, it is said in his hermitage, you know, even the lions or the tigers will come very subdued by that. You know, even the animals can feel when someone is compassionate, kind, and they become also more subdued. Not only they are very subdued, it is said like they don't even attack other animals. And recently I met someone, you know, when was that? I think on Sunday, I met someone from Spain, and I think she came here for a week. So we met and then talked, and then it happened to be, she lived in one of the center, Wesseling, and she know, and she worked there, and then she know the Lama Wessel's parent and also Lama Wessel. And she said she just met Lama Wessel a couple of months ago. And then we're talking, and then she talked about, in Spanish, what do you call for Jesus? Jesus. There is a monk whose name is Jesus from Spanish, and he used to also study in Sera at the same time. And he always kind of meditate. Even during the puja, you see him meditating, and then he would go off in the mountains and meditate for months and months, you know. So he happened to be there now and teaching there. And he was saying that Jesus, when he has a meditation heart, and there is a this is a wolf of fox comes by his place, and it doesn't do to any other places or any other hermitage with any, but he just always come by that. And again, maybe it is he's feeling the compassion, the love, bodhicitta, you know, whatever. And whether it's animal or whether it's human beings, you know, as I always says, His Holiness Dalai Lamas, everyone feels so. Those who have met him in the audience of him, they feel that energy and totally transform their mind, change their mind, you know. Someone who has better heart mind make them very soft, just being present. I don't know is it true or not, but I have been, I heard it, you know, it could be just someone just made it or true, I don't know. I think I heard Indira Gandhi, you know, she used to be the prime minister, very strong woman, prime minister of India. She advised his son, Rajiv Gandhi, not to meet Dalai Lama because she was afraid that when she's in, he meltdowns, because it seems like she had that experience, you know, because as a politician, sometimes they feel like you have to be strong, you know, hard. And they feel if you are too male down, you feel weak. Some people feel that. And so he didn't want his son to be a weak politician. And also, so that was kind of, but I don't know how accurate that I heard that is going. But anyway, that is some kind of effect that so many people have felt. Yeah. It's good if a habit develop that constantly check to what extent the mind has generated, since everything stems from the bodhicitta, is saying the bodhicitta, everything's come from that bodhicitta mind. So it is really good habit to constantly check that. Whether or not the root of Mahayana has been planted, or whether or not one is included amongst Mahayanas, it depends on bodhicitta mind. If you have bodhicitta mind, you become true Mahayanist, and you become you have entered the bodhisattva's path. If you don't have that bodhicitta mind, and then you can aspire to be Mahayanist, you can aspire to be bodhisattva, but you are not until you get that. So even if it does not arise, do not live at that. So even it is hard to develop, both loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta, even though it might not be so easy to develop, but here, just because it's difficult, you shouldn't live it like that. Otherwise, you will never be able to develop that. And so therefore, so you shouldn't just live it, but you should try even harder. If it is easier, then you might not have to try so hard. It is more difficult, you have to try more harder, and therefore do not leave it that, and in order to develop that bodhicitta mind, you need to create all the right cause and conditions. And so some of the cause and condition to cultivate the bodhicitta mind is rely on the virtuous friend who teach. So relying on the virtuous friend or teacher who teach about bodhicitta, loving kindness and compassion. And also always keep companion that is mind training. And also to be around people who have more loving kindness, compassion, who are training in bodhicittas, so that you get inspired by them, so that you get encouraged by them. And so we need to create all the right cause and conditions. While you are trying to practice, also we need the support of your Sangha companion who also encourage loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta mind. Also teachers who encourage through the teaching, through their example, through their, and so forth. Read the scriptures of the teachers and their commentaries. So read the, Buddha's sutras, which teach on bodhicitta, loving kindness bodhicitta, as well as their commentary by Indian masters and Tibetan masters, especially Lojong and Lam-Rim teachings, At its cost, and on top of that, accumulate the collections, accumulating merit and the wisdom, and purify your abstractions through the purifications. So you try to accumulate as much as merit, you try to purify as much as all the obscurations. And so when all these come together, then practice become more easy, more success, and realization come more easily. And as I've told before, Lama Tsongkhapa with his own story of that through the advice of Manjushri, where it is not enough just reflecting, contemplating, meditating. And the advice given, try to accumulate merit, try to purify it, try to continue to study, and then try to reflect, contemplate, and then try to see the guru and deity inseparable and make a supplication, a request. And then when you do all this together, then realization will come quickly. And Lama Tsongkhapa followed that, and he had the realization after he did that. So same way Lama Tsongkhapa, again and again, time to time, he again emphasized on that. And because with his own personal experiences, and that was how he was able to have those realizations, Since it's certain that if you train your mind this way, the seed will be fully planted, because we do have the seed. It's not fully grown up, so that will be nurtured and fully developed. And those actions of are no little importance, and so they are extremely important, those practices. And then reason to joy. It is as the great elder says, for those who wish to enter the gate of Mahayana Dharma, is worth an eon's effort on bodhicitta to grow. Here we complain after a couple of years, with a very weak practice, okay, with a very undisciplined practice, we do one day and we don't do 2 days, or we do one day and we don't do for 1 week, or we do for 1 week and then we don't do for a few weeks, and practice is so fluctuating that, and undisciplined, very weak, and within a few years we feel, oh, it's not working. It's not working. Even though it says in the teaching, but it doesn't work. When we give up or become very discouraged, Here, Lama Atisha is saying, is worth to develop the bodhicitta and to put effort, even it takes eons. Such should be the attitude, Even it takes eons, I will continue to practice. I will not give up. Even it might take my whole, not just one lifetime, not many lifetimes, eons of lifetime, I will continue to not to give up, I will continue to practice. That should be the attitude. Then you will not be easily discouraged. Which, like the sun and moon, illuminate the darkness and pacify scorching heat. So the bodhicitta mind is like the sun and the moon, the sun which illuminate the darkness, the moon which illuminate or pacify the scorching heat. So therefore is like that. So then taking the vow, so then we live here general mind by the rituals. So then taking the both of vows. So we live here for today. As we have been talking about, there is no absolute good and bad. So suffering is not absolutely good or bad. It's all perspective, all relative. And if you look from certain perspective, as you said, it can be helpful, beneficial. Because if you look from the perspective of the Dharma with open mind, with different set of mind, you realize how suffering make you more stronger. You realize how suffering help you to wanting to release from the samsara and to achieve nirvana. You realize because of your own suffering, you realize the suffering for others. Therefore, you continue to have compassion for others. So in that way, it is helpful in that way. But at the same time, if you don't have to suffer, it's better. If I can have compassion for others without having to suffer, that will be better. Okay, the first choice, if I can have a wish to liberate even without having to suffer, that will be best. But if I have no choice, if I suffer, then how can I use that suffering in a good cause and transform in a better? And that is what you are trying to do. So therefore, suffering is unwanted. Nobody really wants it. But when it does happen, then how can we make it useful? And that is the key. And so therefore, in your meditation, you have tried to use your suffering to make it more useful. And that is wonderful. That is great. And yeah. And so therefore, so it again, it is relative, and from what perspective you look at it. And so, but in generally, on conventional level, suffering is something, whether it's human being, whether it's animal, no one would really want it, and something nobody really want it. But when, even despite we don't want it, when we are forced to encounter the suffering and pain, then how can we make it meaningful and transform into something positive? And that's the key. Yeah.